Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Anyone charged with leadership has to constantly confront difficulty. In fact, any leader will tell you that problems are their playing field. But confronting difficulty and challenge is not always easy. It takes courage and bravery. Pope Leo the Great, the Bishop of Rome, from 440 to 461, gives us an example of tremendous courage in the face of controversy. The example he gives in his day can strengthen us to do the challenges in front of us each day in the office and family. Hey everybody, I'm glad you're back with me again, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to gather and to reflect together on the real challenges that confront us as leaders. And the reason I say the real challenges is because anyone who knows what it's like to lead knows that their leadership is full of problems. Because in the sense, like when you're a leader, that's your job. If there were no problems, no challenges, well, there would be no need for leadership, in a real sense, right? Because people would know that all they have to do is live. They just do what's in front of them, do what the next thing is, and simply try to avoid problems. It's when we want to try to stretch, grow, move to the next thing that suddenly decisions need to be made that will help us to achieve that goal. Decisions in the face of conflict, because you've got a choice A or a choice B or a choice C, and then you've got different people with different opinions about how to get there, and the leader has to find the unified vision, hang on to that vision, convince people of that vision, and then overcome the challenges together with them that vision requires them to overcome in order to be successful. It's a really difficult thing because it means that every single day that we wake up to find a new host of challenges in front of us, okay? Just think about parenting. What a great example of that, Just when you think the kids got it down, right? They're tying the shoes down, they're real sweet and kindergarten, everything's going great, they change. It's like they go to the next stage of development. That next stage of development requires another stage of parenting. And you're constantly shifting and molding on a daily basis as your child grows through the intellectual development, emotional development of their life, right? It just never ends. And then you've got people that say, oh, when you retire, then at last, you'll have time to yourself. And it just starts all over again, because then there are the grandchildren. But even so, then you realize your own children are going through their own things that you remember going through. And in the end, we never stop parenting. Parenting is a lifetime of work and therefore a lifetime of solving problems, right? It's a lifetime of leadership. And it's, of course, the same thing when you're in the world of business. The moment that you stop confronting challenge, you really stop growing. You stop moving forward. And therefore, your leadership ceases in its effective role. I love to think of this quote from Gregory the Great, who was a pope at the turn of the 7th century. He said, anyone who is in leadership must accept that their life is lived in a mental storm. That's not realistic, right? That life is lived in a mental storm because you're constantly in the swirling indecision, the difficulty of trying to move the ball from point A to point B. Right? If the ball wanted to go to point B, it would just move itself. No leadership would be necessary. But this isn't what happens, right? The ball does not move itself. That's what we have to do. We're moving from point A to point B. Leadership is, in a very real sense, the art of change, right? The art of learning and guiding change deliberately towards its good course. But this means that we have to confront all of the things that can happen in the gap between point A and point B. Just like a parent whose job it is to take a child and bring them into adulthood has to brave everything that's in between. Being a teenager, going to school, first relationships, first car. Well, so any leader in any endeavor has to brave the dangers of change, okay? And brave them means confronting the challenges that are there and resolving them in line with the vision that you're trying to achieve, okay? So you keep the vision of the end goal deep inside, and then in the light of that vision, and then in the light of the knowledge that you have of the real nature of the thing that you're trying to guide, you guide the nature towards its development. You guide the harmony of the team that's in front of you to be the best team that they can be with a view to the end goal that you're trying to achieve. It's an incredible art because it's a balance point, a balance between the nature of the team, the people that you've got there with you, and sometimes you have to change those people out, or you have to institute a different dynamic in how they're functioning and really work together on team cohesion. And then the vision, the goal. You got to constantly keep in mind where we're going. And it's amazing because when we're leaders, we know that those tension points can sometimes rip each other apart. Sometimes the need for the profit that we're gaining or the project in front of us might be too heavy on the team and cause the team to unravel, right? And so you have to really work. Or on the other hand, the team itself might just lose sight of the end goal. If you're not constantly reminding your people of the vision, constantly saying where we're going over and over and over and over again, well, then the team can implode. And it just start like a dog following its tail, just running around in circles, everyone very busy, but no one really being productive, right? And the leader's constantly in the balance point between those two poles, artfully negotiating the waters of change. It's just that we have to remember when we do that, it means that we're constantly in a mental storm. We are those who brave the frontier between safety and danger, those who brave the pushing point, right, between status quo and the new, those who are on the forefront of progress, whatever it might be, in whatever state it might be, in order to make sure that the good wins out. Okay, the good for our company, the good for our organization, the good for our family. And if we lose that battle, if we run away from that post, seeking the seeming security, right, and the comfort of not having to constantly be in that mental battle, well, we'll also sacrifice our freedom. And we might just sacrifice the success of what is really good. You put the reins in the hand of someone else, they might have a different vision for where the end goal is. They might have less care for the team. They might not do any better job than you're doing, right? And so it's just, is it hard? Yeah, it'll be hard for them too, which is why the easiest thing for a leader to do is to cave into one of those two poles. Either we let go of the vision and just say, let's just, move along and everyone mutually, benefit from the status A and never get to status B and then just jump off once everyone realizes that was a mistake. Or you go on the other side and you plunge yourself so much into the vision that you forget the people that work for you, work with you, and you could become just a profit-driven, example of the loss of culture. And that also is bad. And those two extremes, well, those are the two extremes, whatever it be. I use the business example. It could be the same thing in your family. You can, on the one hand, become your kid's best friend, right? If you wanted to, but like that's not going to work. And on the other hand, you could be just a driving force without compassion and understanding for the child's development, and that also is going to fail. Well, I want you to remember this. Leadership is always going to be hard because it always requires us to face challenges and problems, to brave the confrontation of the world that we've embraced, which is this realm of change between point A and point B, status A and status B. And that's always going to be hard. The fact that it's hard doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong, doesn't mean you're doing it poorly. It means that you're doing it.
Are you a young adult interested in discerning your God-given strengths and talents? And are you searching for the clarity to know how to move forward in your life? Consider joining St. John Institute's Rise Above Retreat, October 27th through November 2nd at our Denver, Colorado campus. We've combined Adeo leadership training, discernment guidance, and Clifton Strengths Finder coaching with prayer and adoration to help you discover how Christ has called you to impact the world in your one-of-a-kind way. Find out more at www.stjohninstitute.org.
I'd like to deepen with you our understanding of the power of some of the saints in the history of the Roman Catholic Church when it comes to leadership. And that's because they've given us some pretty amazing examples of leadership along the way. But more profoundly than that, I really believe that the church is the cradle of leadership, and that the church should be the place that we all look to in order to learn the way that God wants us to lead. Okay, so, and I mean this very rigorously from a theological standpoint, and that is to say this, that since leadership is the result of action, and since all action is the result of freedom, and since God makes us free by His grace should make us free, our freedom should make us act, and our actions should impact the world for Him, resulting in leadership. Grace should cause leadership, okay? At its different levels and its different ways. It's a very broad understanding of what leadership is. Impactful living, intentionally impactful living, right, in the lives of others. And yet grace should be the cause of that. When Jesus says, I came to cast a fire upon the earth, that was a pretty direct statement there. He also said, do you think that I've come for peace? No, I tell you, I've come for the sword. Right? The sword of division. He says, I will divide, between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, between a father and a son, right? And what's he trying to say by that? He's expressing to us the intensity of the life that he came to give us, a life that is called to be given back to the Father, bearing fruit. Okay? We've been given talents, we've been given opportunity in order to make an impact with them. Right? And so what's the impact that you're leaving? Well, that impact is going to be commensurate with your leadership. It's a definition of an understanding of a leader. And since all this is true, well, then if we look at it, we should look at the life of the saints and understand that there we're looking at the life of a leader. And I think every saint is a leader. And one way or the other, some of them had very sad lives, some of them had very difficult lives, but all of them had impactful lives. That's why we celebrate them, right? So by looking at that, we can study God's working out of leadership through the lives of Christians. And then understand in a way, wherever we are and what we're doing, some of what God can teach us, okay? And so there's one life in particular that I want to talk about today, which is Pope St. Leo the Great. Now, I know not all of you are Catholics, and so you might say, why are we talking about a pope and about saints? You can understand if you just listen to the story. I mean, this is fine, regardless of your theological opinion of things. It is a historical fact. And looking at the history of a pope, you're looking at a history of a man who claimed leadership of the church in his time. And Pope Leo the Great was the leader of the Catholic Church from 440 to 461, 21 years. That's a pretty long papacy. Most of the time, popes are elected, they're older, and their papacy is not that long. But Leo the Great, 21 years. Okay? And it was 21 years in real turmoil. He had so many problems going on in the church at that time. I think sometimes we look back and we say, oh my gosh, 440 to 461. We don't even know what was happening historically. It seems like the dark ages, right, so to speak, or things are just lost, to detail. We don't study history, so we lose some of the realism of the figures who were historical figures and the real challenges that they faced. And I'm always reminded of this because as a priest today, I hear people complaining, oh my gosh, about this situation in the world or this political question that's coming up. And people act like we've never faced anything like it before, right? And I'm like, well, maybe you haven't, but there certainly have been situations like this historically. And if we look back, we can understand and gain insight for how we can confront the situations that are in front of us today. We really can. And Leo the Great's a great example of that. If you're looking at what was happening, he was the Pope in Rome at a time when Rome was both being, hailed as the capital of the empire, but where the emperor lived in Constantinople. Okay, so there was a competition between the East and the West within the empire, the political realm. It was split. And you've got different cultures, different languages, and the emperor living in Constantinople, where, of course, that's where all the power is going to be. And yet Rome's saying, well, we are historically the place which is supposed to be the most powerful. And so then in the midst of that, you've got, well, the Church of God is in Constantinople, and the Church of God is in Rome. The Church of God is also in Egypt. The Church of God is in Holy Land. You've got these different sees or major cities that are all claiming to have importance. And Rome is saying, well, we are the most important because Saints Peter and St. Paul died there. Right, so and this has historically been the place where we claim St. Peter's bones are. And so since St. Peter was the first of all the apostles, the place where he died is the most important of all of the sees, or all of the seats, right, of the church at that time. Well, if the emperor is living in Constantinople, well, then the emperor, wherever the emperor is, the bishop of Constantinople is going to say, well, this is the center of the empire, and so this is the political capital. I am more important than your historical place over there in Rome. And then, of course, the places down like in Egypt and in Jerusalem, they're going to say, well, we have the true faith because such and such a saint was from here, and he proclaimed these doctrines that are so important to where we are today, and so forth. So you've got all this kind of jockeying for position. And you might not like that. A lot of people say, I don't like all that stuff of an institutional church and all this politics. Well, yes, you might not. But I'll tell you what, it was what was happening then. Okay? And the leader of the church, which was Pope Leo, who was in Rome, he had to confront the fact that separation and rivalry was creating confusion about the faith. Major confusion. Okay, I'm not going to get into the theology with it because that's not your point. But when the faith gets confused, you have to understand, like, that's the job of these people. The job of the bishops is to keep the faith from being confused. And the faith was getting confused. And it was getting confused with a lot of political intrigue. Such and such an emperor had liked this school of thought, so he was getting involved in theology. And so he was like saying, this is what's going to help the empire. So we want this monk over here and his way of understanding it to rise, right? And if he rises in power, well, then I'll be able to influence the church for political purposes, right? And Pope Leo the Great had to confront that. It would have been so easy for him to simply let things go. It would have been easy for him to say, I'm not a leader, just let it go. But a truly great leader rises to the occasion and says, where there is theological error, I have to confront it, even if it's at the expense of violence, or even if that's the expense of a really difficult confrontation that I would rather avoid. Leo didn't avoid it. Instead, he wrote a letter and had it proclaimed, and the letter was so masterfully written that to this day it's studied as just an incredible theological treatise. He stepped in, had it proclaimed, and then everyone who was gathered to decide on the matter said, this is it. Peter has spoken through Leo. Now, I want to make this real for you, right? Because today we're like, what does that have to do with my life? Are you willing to step forward intellectually and debate the points of confusion that are affecting your family, your business, and your team? Are you ready to up your game? And instead of just getting along or managing people this way or that way, actually get to the root cause, dissect things, use your mind forcefully and persuasively to say what the truth is. I don't think a lot of you are. Maybe you are in your company, but you're certainly not in society. We live in a world where all kinds of crazy ideas are out there, and people are not confronting them intellectually. A lot of people, even sitting in this room right now, are not even sure that the truth exists, that there is a truth. Well, if you're not convinced the truth exists, you're certainly not going to intellectually try to strive after it. And the danger of this, without the leash that intellect provides for power, power is left to its own devices. And that power left to its own devices will destroy everything in its path, including the one who wields it. Pope Leo the Great knew this. And so he confronted the emperor, he confronted his brother bishops, he confronted the world with intellectual truth, even though it cost him a great deal. And it was difficult and harrowing and courageous. He braved it. And I want to ask you, are you willing to do the same thing? Study, understand, and stay faithfyou to what is true. It's the mark of a leader who's going to guide a process, not just to the conclusion that you want it to achieve, but to the conclusion that's best for it. That requires, the word best requires a true nature of things and their true development, and the intellect of the leader to bring what is in process to the true fulfillment that it's called to achieve.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
Pope Leo I ruled over the Roman Catholic Church from the years 440 to 461. But during that time, we had all kinds of internal debate happening and within the church. Oh my gosh, the politics, it really is fascinating to read, right? Because it's so true. What was so true then is still true today. And yet it was also a time of difficulty from the outside. A political intrigue and political threat from a foreign nation. And when we say that, today we kind of think, okay, we're used to this. And then we send over a few missiles and we move an aircraft carrier and then the thing resolves. But this is not what was going on in Rome. You had a force the world had never seen or reckoned with before that was literally overwhelming the empire's defenses and staging a direct attack at the heart of the civilization and the culture that existed at that time, okay, within Rome. It was Attila the Hun. Okay, we can conjure up all kinds of images for what we think of this man, but he himself was an incredible leader. It's just that his leadership, well, it was feeding on devastation. And so as he moved forward, he would just devastate his opponent. And by devastation, it's every form of violence and things that you could possibly imagine. That's what they were doing. They would leave nothing behind. His attack was so violent that the Romans named it the scourge of God. Meaning they were like, listen, we have so much corruption going on in the empire right now and so much just tomfoolery and playing around. It's just horrible that God is punishing us. And the form of his punishment is he's sending us Attila the Hun. Okay, so as he was coming along, he left nothing in his path, and Rome was not able to defend itself. The empire was not succeeding in its defense. So and Attila was making a beeline straight for Rome, the ancient capital, right? And this would mean that all the people would be killed, that it would just be terrible. I mean, it would be absolutely devastating for all the lives of all of these people. Well, what would you do? Because on the one hand, if you can't resist him, you try militarily, you're going to die. And if you stay where you are, then you're going to die. Right? This is the spot where a leader needs to confront a very thorny problem, right? It seems like a lose-lose situation. So what do you do? What do you do when that's your case? When you see the market changing, when you see people coming at you from the outside, when you realize the real risks that you're running with your own money when you start your own company, or when you just have a personality that you're scared to confront because they're thorny and difficult, or a situation that you just realize, man, I have to resolve this, but I don't know how to resolve this situation at all, right? What do you do? Well, a lot of people just turn tail and run. They quit. They don't even try because they're scared. If you fight, you lose. If you stay, you lose. So the easiest thing is just to bail. Yeah, but if you bail, then everybody loses, right? Because they lose because you have to confront this situation. You've got a bully in school, and he's bullying you. You've got to stand up and fight him. How do you do that? Well, Pope Leo the Great, according to legend, and it might be a legend, but it's written down. So it's, anyway, an incredible tale. He leaves Rome alone on a horse, and he is dressed up as a bishop. So the Huns would have recognized who he was. They understood what was going on, and he was in his full regalia, right? So he would have had a hat on. He would have had his robes shining. I mean, it would have been really something. And he rode his horse directly up to confront Attila the Hun. He braved the confrontation. And this is such a famous scene. I mean, painters have painted this scene, right? Like authors have written books about it. Just imagine what this would have looked like. These warriors coming in from another country, dressed in totally different dress, with their own attitudes of having ravaged the countryside for 1,000 miles, right? And then you've got this pope, a solitary figure representing the antiquity of Rome and all of the civilization that had it represented, and all the values and the great things of the church and of the city of Rome. And he strides straight up to the face, and you have this moment where these two leaders of two competing civilizations, ways of thought, ways of life, are standing and staring eye to eye. It must have been terrifying for Leo the Great. I mean, he's completely overwhelmed. He had no defense, nothing that could save him except God. And according to legend, he knelt in front of Attila the Hun, and he said these words: "The people of Rome, once conquerors of the world, now kneel conquered. We pray for mercy and deliverance. O Attila, you could have no greater glory than to see suppliant at your feet this people, before whom once all peoples and kings lay suppliant. You have subdued, O Attila, the whole circle of the lands granted to the Romans. Now we pray that you, who have conquered others, should conquer yourself. The people have felt your scourge. Now they would feel your mercy." It's quite a play, right? He literally saying, "Oh, Attila, conquer yourself now and show mercy instead of doing violence." But I'm not quite sure it was just his words that convinced him, because according to legend, at that moment, Saints Peter and St. Paul appeared behind him as giants with swords made of fire brandished over their heads. And behind them, the angels filled the sky, all of them holding swords of fire, showing the might of God behind this kneeling old man who'd be so easy for him to strike down. And Attila turned and went back. Now, what's important to me isn't so much the legend itself as it is the courage of the Pope to do just this, to confront the situation in front of him, even though he didn't have the power to resolve it on his own, but to do it with faith in God. And this is my call to you all, that no matter what's in front of you, the one who is behind you is bigger than the one in front of you, because the one who's behind you is Jesus Christ. And if you have your faith in him and you live from him, he will show you the way. But you have to be strong and courageous to confront that situation, to ride out to meet the challenge and the problem that's in front of you, even when it's overwhelming, because Jesus has called you to lead and to have the humility, like Leo, to put everything on the line and to trust that God will fight at your side.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.